Okay, Dominic, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Perfect. Well, everyone, welcome to my senior project presentation, Implications of Cybersecurity in the Modern World. So, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it to each and every one of you. And when I was running my practices, I definitely did not imagine a room this big with this many people in it. So, that's a paradigm shift. So I'd like to thank a special thank you for my panel members. I'd like to thank you, Joey Polletta, Miss Beeler, Mr. Brennan, and Miss Riley. And I'd like to thank my audience members for being here today. So, my central question: what preventative measures can be taken to protect against hackers, and how do hackers manipulate flaws to circumvent cybersecurity? So, in order to answer my central question in research on this project, I consulted an expert. My expert was Andy Cook. He's the CEO and co-founder of Tetra, which is a startup company that specializes in data storage and cataloging. He has many years of experience in tech startups and data management, and he answered many of my questions that were very important to me about the dangers of hacking in a corporate environment and in a personal environment. So, what was my inspiration for having a project like this? I have grown up around computers all my life. I have seen these types of hacking attacks before. I've had them happen to me when I was younger and more inexperienced. I've had them happen to siblings, friends. I've had it happen to complete strangers. And I was curious about how these types of attacks are actually done, whether they are as glamorized in media as they seem to be, and the answer to that was no, but it was a very good question at the time. So, what I had already known about this. So I had already known about some of the types of scams that go on, how they're about phishing and DDoS attacks, which I will be going into detail later in the presentation. And I knew many of the pitfalls that people fall into that cause them to get hacked. I knew that hacking wasn't portrayed in the way that it necessarily was. It's not nearly as glamorous as any of the movies show, where it's a man sitting at a keyboard for 30 seconds, sweating profusely, and then he hits the enter button and he says, "I'm in." It's nowhere close to as cool as that. It's still pretty cool. So, how hacking actually works, it's nowhere close to the Matrix either, much to my disappointment. You don't actually see the big black screen with the green text scrolling at all, which was completely disappointing because that's been my desktop background for years. More often than not, with hacking, it's user error that causes them to be targeted. By reducing the user error, the less chance you have of being attacked. The most popular types of attacks are phishing, DDoS, and redirect, among others. So, there are two main types of hackers. There are white hat hackers who work for companies, and there are black hat hackers who work against companies. Both tend to work for themselves. However, it's not unheard of for a hacker to work in a group in order to take on a big project. So why would someone want to hack into something? So the main reason for this, and many reasons in life, is because they want to be paid. They want to be able to pay for groceries. They want to be able to pay their bills. They want money. So a BitClass report survey on a national convention of black hat and white hat hackers found that over 88% of hackers work only for money and not because of any sense of ego. They don't do it because it makes them feel cool, but it's because it's a job to them. It makes them money, it pays for their groceries. So, white hat hackers are one of the ways that company can hire someone to defend their data. A hacker can go in, find all of the issues in the database that a black hat hacker would find, steal that data, report back to the company, and show, here's everywhere you went wrong, here's what you need to fix in order to make this data secure. If they are able to get in, there's a big issue there, and they report that to the company. They do everything a black hat hacker would do, except they're the good guys. There's been a huge spike in interest in government white hat hacking. There's been a number of programs dedicated to this that introduce youth into the program. Andy Greenberg from Forbes wrote an entire article about how many programs the government is implementing in order to interest youths into going into this field. How high school students, middle school students, college students are being brought to these types of competitions to learn about how to do this, all the risks that are entailed with it, and how to combat it. Tim Green from Network World wrote an article about how since 2006 the government has started to roll these programs into effect, how there are these camps that kids can go to, where the government incentivizes them to learn about this, how they have contests that build them up into hackers that the government will later employ in order to defend their own networks. Selena Larson, an article writer at CNN, wrote about how many branches of the government are implementing these programs. The Air Force, Pentagon, the Marines, they all have data that they need to keep secure, and one of the best defenses for that is to hire a white hat hacker. They will be able to identify some of the issues that some of the less secure facilities have, and be able to report that before someone who is looking to endanger country security can get in and exploit that. On the other hand, we have black hat hackers, who are typically self-employed, and they hack into things that will get them the most. They don't work for anyone typically. They are solo, going in, getting what they need, going out. Some black hat hackers are employed, and they will be employed by either a corporation to go into a enemy corporation, a rival, to get the information they need, or they will be done by a single contractor looking to get information from a company. If they know how to exploit it, but they don't know how to actually get in, it's a job that a black hat hacker could go in and be hired for. One such enterprise that a black hat hacker could do is hack into a store database, such as Walmart or Target, get into their credit card system, steal the credit card information from them, and then they have your credit card information sold either by themselves, going into your own bank account, picking out withdrawals, or sold on the dark web in order to make a quick buck to the highest seller. So, now that I've mentioned the dark web, it's probably a good idea to explain it. The dark web is a specific area of the internet that can only be accessed through a web browser. Mark Andesine from the Wall Street Journal wrote how the dark web is used for all these illegal activities, and the only way that you can get access to it is through this specific web browser. My infographic over to the left from the Blue Live Threat Assessment Company shows a representation of the internet with a iceberg. The top of the iceberg above the water is everything that you and I would go through on a daily basis, going onto Facebook, onto Twitter, all these things, and going through, and they are accessible by a search engine, we can normally access them. Below that is the stage of the deep web, where this is everything that you can't access through a search engine. If you looked up Joey Polletta's bank records, if they exist, then you wouldn't be able to find anything. That's stored deeper within. Within a level below that is then the dark web. The only way that you can access this is on a secure channel where you can only access it through this web browser. There's no other way to get this information. And the dark web, due to its harsh way of getting into it and not ease of access, it allows for completely anonymous interactions online, and is typically where a black hat hacker would go in order to sell information that they have stolen, or in order to get hired for a job in order to steal information. There's also more savory uses for the dark web, despite the name. One such example is Edward Snowden, whistleblowers everywhere. This guarantees completely anonymous interactions, so they can share these secrets without having the fear of being targeted afterwards for being a whistleblower. So, now that I've talked about hackers, how bad they are, how they can get into all your stuff, it might be a good idea to calm that down a little and talk about how vulnerable you are. And there's good news and bad news. And if you are really bad about handling yourself online, you don't take any risks, you take many risks about going onto shady websites, downloading things that you shouldn't, you're not very secure about how you conduct yourself, you could be at very high risk of being attacked or hacked. On the inverse of that, if you do all those things right, you have good password security, you go through everything, you make sure that you are diving into everything that you need to do in order to be successful online, then you have a huge alleviated risk from there. There is low chance of them coming for you. Hackers are lazy. They are people who want to make the money the quickest, and if you are not an easy target, they have no reason to go for you over someone who is way more vulnerable. Most of these attacks happen because of human error, i.e. downloading from an untrustworthy source, falling for something that seems like a little bit off, such as if Facebook asks for your social security number, it's probably not a good idea to give it to them. If if you have the same password for all your accounts, these are little things that add up to be a huge issue for you. If you take these out of the solution, you have a much better chance of staying safe. So, I have a little demonstration to you about staying safe. So, one of the worst things that you can do ever online or in person is leave your laptop open for someone to come by. How many of you have ever left your laptop open just on your desk, leaving it by? So, yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone? Okay. So, really bad idea. So this is one of the MacBooks that we have in our physics classrooms. This one I took from Miss Smith's room, a couple of doors over. And as you can see, the password for the main screen is very complicated. It is enter. And so, the first step to that is I'm now into the computer. There's not necessarily anything incriminating on the desktop that I could get into, but I'm gonna get into something. So, what we have is Google, right? One cool feature about most modern web browsers is that you can go in and you type in your username, you type in your password, and it'll say, would you like to save this password? And 90% of the time, you're gonna click yes, because it's way easier than typing out your username every time and typing out your password every time. That information does get stored somewhere that people can access it if they look for it. So on Safari, what you're able to do is you go up to the taskbar at the top, click on Safari, you can go into the Preferences tab, and we have a menu here that says Passwords. In order to access the passwords, you need your computer password, which, if you have a good one on your computer, alleviates some of the risk. However, on these ones, the password, as I showed earlier, was enter. So, now what we have here is a list of accounts that are logged in on the computer and their passwords. We have 3 Gmail accounts and 1 Infinite Campus account. So, for ease of use, what we're going to do is it has both the username here, and hidden behind asterisks is the password. However, if I click on it, it's no longer behind asterisks, and I can copy that password onto my clipboard. I can go all the way back to Gmail. I can type in the student's ID for getting in. And for security purposes, we're not going to show his name because there's some weird stuff in here. So, at msad6g.org. Okay, now I need the password. Control V, I have pasted the password in. Next. And we're in. So now, I'm just going to cover his name. But what we have is we're into all of his email information. We can see that there's an email from Carrie Jennings on May 1st that still has not been read. It's May 8th. About missing classwork in asterisks. Important, please read. There's a couple more about job contracts. Your IQ test results. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Now, I'm sure that I wouldn't want any of my emails going out into the world, and I'm sure you guys don't either. So, it can be much worse for adults who have more than just their email. This student here has just their email account, but if I saw, for say, Miss Riley's laptop sitting out on the counter, guide to her password, if she used the same password for her bank account as she used for her email, all I have to do is do the same thing I just did for Gmail, copy and paste it into bank account, and then I have access to Miss Riley's personal finances, which, Miss Riley, I'm sure as you're aware, that would be really bad. I'm 18, I don't really know how to manage much. So, how can you protect yourself against hacking? First step, don't leave your laptop out. That's a really bad thing to do, and one of the easiest ways to get into something is to have the actual hardware in front of you. So, after that, one of the important steps is knowing what types of attacks there are. Having knowledge about this can help you prevent them and see them in the future. Keeping a level head about where you are on the internet and what types of things you're doing. If there's something that seems off, it's probably for a good reason. Recognizing the warning signs of attack. Once we go through the steps of an attack and how they're introduced and how they're done, the warning signs will give you a tip before it's already too late to lose your data. Reduce the risk factors that I'm going to talk about. If you reduce those risk factors, the chance of you being hacked goes down significantly with each one. So, how to protect yourself. So, like I was talking about in our MacBook example, using different passwords for different accounts is super important. An article by Scott Applegate talks about the dangers of presenting yourself online and what some of those risks can be. And one of the biggest things that you can do is keep different passwords for everything. If you use the same password, like I said, you can take a Gmail password, put it into a bank account, put it into any other account, and you have access to it instantly. If you don't download things off of shady websites, which I feel is kind of self-explanatory, but some people don't understand the level of risk that you have. If you're downloading Game of Thrones Season 3 offline and they're giving it to you for free, there's a reason they're giving it to you for free, and that's because there's typically some sort of program in there that infects your computer, steals your information, and sends it out just because you didn't want to pay for HBO. It's not really a worthwhile risk, and downloading things that are not safe is a surefire way to lose your data. And another one of the steps that my expert said was one of the most important to his company and to you as users of the internet is check how reputable the website you are on is. If you're going to Facebook.com, they have a huge reputation. They have many thousands of millions of users. They have a good reputation, maybe not so much in recent weeks, but they have a good reputation in general. If you're going on to www.notascam.com, that has a lot less reputation. You have to be careful of those websites. Now, some of the common mistakes, some of these risk factors that can help increase your risks. Using really simple passwords is abysmal for this. Using your birthday, close ones to your birthday, pet's name, friend's name, social security number is probably not a good one to put in there. In an article by Lore about all password security, the chances of using a password like that increase your chances of being hacked dramatically because this information is available online. Many of your Facebook pages have your birthday in it, as I'd imagine. If you use your birthday for that, all a hacker or I have to do is Google so-and-so on Facebook, birthday's there. It's a first password guess. Now, this infographic from Stay Safe Australia on the left, on the right, my left, shows you some of the most common passwords shown all over the world. The number one is 123456. And if you look at that number right there, that's about a lot of people using 123456 as their password, and it stupefies me. But not as much as 12345, 123456789, password, it's capitalized at least, I suppose. I love you and princess are very sweet, but also very insecure and not very good passwords to use. Using a password that's simple makes it that much easier for you to be targeted. If after 100 tries a hacker can't get into your account, they're going to deem it not worth their time and move on. If you have 123456, they get it on the first try, they have access to all your information. Now, like I said earlier, if you have a simple password, bad. If you have the same password on multiple accounts, really bad. Because if they get that simple password once, they now have that simple password for everything. All of your accounts at their fingertips. Now, one of the most important steps I had talked about earlier was knowing what types of attacks there are, and that's important because you can then prevent them. So, the most effective type of attack is one that you should be the most worried about. So, what would be the most effective type of attack? According to a Bit Class Report survey, the one earlier about black hat hackers and white hat hackers at a national convention, they both agreed across their party lines that the most effective attack that they could possibly undergo is a phishing attack. And it's very, very funny if you confuse phishing with phishing because they're completely different. Shown by my little humorous image on the right there. Phishing attacks are very low cost, they are low effort, they can be sent to hundreds of thousands of people without changing any of the information, and so their use is exponentially rising each year. The Phishing Activity Trend Report predicts that it's going to keep on doubling for some years now. It's important that you know how this attack works and to be able to combat it and be able to recognize the warning signs in order to fight against it and not lose all your data. So now that I've said that you need to know what it is and how to fight it, it's probably a good time to explain what it is and how to fight it. So, a phishing attack is one of the most common types of attacks that you will hear about. Typically is sent to your email from an unrecognized source, sometimes posing as an important figure such as the IRS or supervisor, your boss at work, and Mironella talks about this. What are the most common types of emails that get people, and it's these ones. The people that are in a place of authority above you, they pose as those in order to make you insecure and want to give that information. If your boss gave you an email saying, we had a security breach, we need your password, your first inclination is probably like, okay boss, right away, please don't fire me. That's what my reaction would be. So when they have that grab on you, they'll ask for security details, passwords, social security numbers, credit card numbers, to check on security and make sure that you're not at risk. As soon as you give them this information, you've gone from not at risk to at risk, which completely defeats the point of what you were trying to do in the first place. They have your information, and now they can use it for whatever they want. This infographic over to the right here shows some of the most common phishing emails that people will fall for, and they're people that you respect. The top one is coworker, talking about a meeting. People will fall for these types of emails, and once they fall for the email, the hackers now have your information. So, my senior project invitation was an example of a phishing type email. One of the most common types of phishing email from the early internet was a Nigerian prince inviting you to donate funds to him so he can move his entire offshore banking account to you, and you get 10% of his vast wealth. And it was always a lie. So, my invitation imitated this form and was sent to all of you. Now, as you can see, it's never a Nigerian prince. From ABC News, this is not a Nigerian prince, this is a man from Louisiana, and is very deceptive. Many will make an offer that you can't, that seems too great to refuse. 10% of some rich Nigerian prince's funds? That sounds great. All I have to pay is $200, except afterwards you end up $200 poorer and no 10% of your cut. They do this in order to lower your guard. You want to believe it. You want to be rich, and so they just steal your information, taking advantage of that. So, another type of attack that is super important to worry about is a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack. It's when a website has so much data sent to it that it can't deal with it and shuts down. An example of this would be, let's say you have a mailbox, piece of mail, works fine, and then someone shoves in 1,000 pieces of mail at once, and it can't fit through the crack of the mailbox. That mailbox is not working anymore. That's what happens to the website. It completely shuts down. No one can access this. An example of this was in 2014. Facebook had a huge DDoS attack against it. Many millions of packets of data being sent each second, completely overwhelming them. The way that this is done, shown by my infographic on the right there, from SC Magazine, is that one attacker will have one computer that has many virtual little computers on it that will send one packet of data each. So if you have one big computer that's has thousands of small computers, it's overwhelming and will destroy the website very quickly unless it has important infrastructure. Now, these types of attacks are not as important on consumers because they are not the ones who are directly affected by this. This is for companies. If you weren't able to access your website you need to get onto, let's say you wanted to go on your Northeastern credit union in order to manage your funds, and suddenly it's down, you can't pay your bills, you're going to be very upset. And that's what these attacks do. They sow discontent in the user base and are typically some sort of corporate espionage in order to defame or ruin the reputation of another company. Users don't really have to worry about their data being leaked out there because it is all on the website. It's on the website's part. Another type of important attack, and this one is much more important to consumers, is a redirect type attack. It's very aptly named. It redirects you. A paper published by Juniper Research by Smith talks about how the purpose of the attack is in order to redirect you from one place that you trust into another to steal your information. An attack can come from a malicious ad, a hacked website, or suspicious link. So the autonomy here is on the consumer. The attack is through them. If you go to a normal website and there's a malicious advertisement, seems fishy, don't click on it. If you don't click on it, you'll be safe. If you have a spam link and you click on it, that's where you go wrong. Don't click on the spam link, don't click on the malicious ad. The issue arises when it's a compromised website, when they have a data vulnerability inside of it that allows hackers to put their own code in that redirects you. If you're on Northeastern Credit Union and you send all your bank information in and they're compromised, it'll take you through to where you put in data, and then for just a brief second, takes you to their website, they grab your data, they put you back through to where you expect to be. It happens so quick, you don't see it happen. Once you get to this stage, there's not much you can really do to protect yourself. So the most important step, as I've said maybe 100 times during this presentation already, at least it feels like it, is protect yourself by keeping a good mind of where you are. Pay attention to the reputation of the website. If it is Bank of America, they have many engineers and consultants working to make sure these types of things don't happen. You have to go for trustworthy websites in order to protect yourself against these types of attacks. And one of the sources on this and talks about it is by Jaworski, talking about all these types of attacks, the best ways to prevent yourself against hacking in specific. Now, the good news about all this doom and gloom about here's how you're vulnerable, here's how you kind of fix it. If you act smart online and you minimize these risk factors we've talked about, then you're in luck. You're not going to be targeted nearly as much as someone who has a cheap password and uses it for everything else. They are the easy targets and they're going to be picked off first. Many of the most popular attacks, such as phishing, rely on you, the victim, in order to slip up and give away your information. Having a good sense of where you are online is an important step in order to keep yourself safe. Make sure you check the URL of the website you're on in order to make sure you are where you think you are. This picture over right here shows you're on Facebook.com and it looks completely legitimate. But if you check the URL, it is not Facebook.com, it is some Russian website. You have to be aware of these things in order to protect yourself. Some of the things to look for when looking for a phishing attack or some of these other attacks, you need to check whether they would need this information. An example I used earlier, if Facebook is asking for your social security number, that should be your first clue, and probably the only clue you need to say something's wrong here. Facebook should never need my social security number. You should check for spelling errors. Many of these attacks come from non-English speaking countries where they tend to have grammatical or spelling errors throughout where they don't properly convey the message that they're supposed to. This email over to the right, it seems to be an email from eBay saying that you need your password changed. But as soon as you do this and look through it, there are a couple spelling errors in there. If you look for these spelling errors, grammatical issues, it can be a worthwhile sign to see that something is wrong. Poor grammar is a really good indicator of this. Now, one of the most important steps, and one of the steps that people ignore the most often, is you push off your updates. I know that I do it all the time, and it's a terrible thing to do, and after this presentation, I will never do it again. Windows will say, Windows Update will be starting in 5 minutes. And you go, no you will not, and you click the button, and you say, try again tomorrow. You hit remind me, pops up tomorrow, and you're like, now? Well, not now. And you flick it off. You keep on pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off. And many times, nothing seems to go wrong, because until something goes wrong, everything's fine. These updates are security updates many of the time. When you don't update it, you're leaving vulnerabilities that hackers can manipulate to get in. Once they update it, hackers know what was wrong with the previous update, and they can manipulate that even better than they could have before the update. Problem solved if you update, though. If you update, they have no way to get in. My expert, Andy Cook, had identified this as one of the most crucial steps for their company to take. If they update all their various programs and applications that they use in daily business, then the chances of them being hacked go down significantly. It's a very important step, and it takes like 5 minutes in order to restart your computer and get everything back up, and that can save you much heartache and damage to your information along the line. So, coming back to my essential question, what are some of the preventative measures that can be taken to protect against hackers, and how do hackers manipulate flaws to circumvent cybersecurity? Well, in summary, hackers take advantage of existing weaknesses in both security and, more importantly, in human behavior in order to get what they want. Security, there's not much you can do as a consumer. You have to rely on the places that you're going to be trustworthy, and it's up to you to decide what place is trustworthy for you. If it's human behavior, you have all the control there. You can decide whether you want to type in your password on a sketchy website, whether you want to pay attention to the typo in the email you just received. You have to keep good password security. This will help you immensely to keep people out of your account. Keeping aware of where you are on the internet helps mitigate these risks. Keeping all your programs up to date can drastically improve everything. Look out for spelling errors and be alert and cautious of everything online. A healthy bit of skepticism can help you out a long way in the long run. one of the things I found in my research that was the most important was learning about this. I am constantly online, and I still was like, I do that every day. It was terrifying to learn, well, since you didn't update in like 3 months, I'm sorry, but like you're gonna get hacked in the next week. And that was scary. So I went home and updated immediately. This education should be more prevalent, especially in an age where everyone is connected to the internet. Everything we do at school, Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Mail, all this is internet focused, and we don't have the same level of experience that everyone has. It should be a required course in order to learn about all this information. If you learn about the risks of hacking, as shown through this presentation, your chances of being hacked go down dramatically. We're becoming ever more and more connected to the internet. There are toasters that connect to the internet, and if you don't know the first thing about what hacking is, how it works, and how you can protect yourself, you're going to be in a world of hurt in 20 years when your eyes are connected to the internet, or something insane that we can't even imagine now. Teaching these skills to kids in school is an important step to prepare the next generation for the future of the world that they're going into. I know that when I was in 6th grade, we set up an email account, and I chose the worst password ever, which I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which puts me off the top 10, but still really bad. Just learning about these things at an early age can help out dramatically and improve how these kids interact with the modern world. So I have my works cited right here. And so, as you can see, I read a lot of papers, and they are tech people, so they were not nearly as interesting as reading a book. So I had a lot of these, and this was just for the presentation. So, as my conclusion, and even though the Matrix is not like hacking, I really like the imagery. So, thank you very much for attending my presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, so now we're going to open this up to questions from the panel. So panel, if you have any questions, fire away.
Yes, brother?
So, as of recently, as you expressed, there's a kind of media association with hackers, and there have been quite a few games or other forms of media based on it. So I know how you mentioned the Matrix, but other stuff like Welcome to the Game, is this accurate representations, or?
I would say 90% of scenarios, absolutely not. Most of it is just clicking on keyboards, looking at stuff, and then you're in. Like I mentioned earlier, the typical media representation of a hacker is either a sweaty person in their mom's basement or a man sitting hunched over a keyboard, furiously typing for a good 30 seconds while the camera zooms in on his face and a single bead of sweat drops down, and then the screen goes green and he's in. This is completely wrong. Everything about that portrayal is wrong. If we had better media representation of hacking, I believe it would be much more taken seriously and prevented in the modern world.
I have a couple questions. My first one's kind of a dumb question, but you
There
talked
are no
about.
dumb questions.
You talked about. Don't say that yet. You talked about how there was a survey of hackers, and 88% said they do this for money. How do they survey hackers?
So this was actually a question I have been asked when I put this in here. It's a national convention. They don't go in and it's like, here's your white hat card, here's your black hat card, and they don't identify that. They go in as a hacker of whatever type. There's conventions where they work with physical hardware, software hardware, and they go in and it's basically like a teacher's workshop for hackers. They go in and talk about all the modern things that are updating with how to deal with this.
So there would be white hat and black hat hackers.
Yes, but they would not be labeled as such. They would
Right.
be going in as just, hi, I'm here for the hacking convention.
Right. Okay. So that sort of fits into my next question. I'd like you to put your white hat hacker hat on. And, so how would one go about getting rid of those passwords on those physics computers and prevent that from happening in the future?
Well, personally, I can do that for you like tomorrow if you want.
I would appreciate that. But could you also teach me how to
course.
prevent that from happening in
Yeah,
the future?
so one of the things that is important is just being able to get into that screen, which not many people realize is there. you can remove it from there directly. On Chrome, it's even easier than that. You can just delete all of them at once. On Safari, you have to go in and get rid of them one by one, but it's not a difficult thing to get rid of them or put them in there. It's a difficult thing to realize that they're there in the first place and acknowledge that problem.
And my last question is, so I agree with you that this education and letting people know about this stuff is really very important, but obviously not everybody can watch a presentation like this and become informed. So is there anything that's being built into, say, web browsers that can help people identify when they're at risk of being hacked?
Yes, many extensions, such as even AdBlock, have these things where users will identify this website is one that scammed me. And one of the Chrome screens that you can see is, it'll say suspicious website and it'll block you. It'll have big red screen, big X to show you this has been identified as one that is an issue. You might want to take a look at this. And the only way that you can get past is like going onto a small drop down menu that's very hard to see and thinking, yeah, I still want to go through with this. So there are steps being taken by big businesses such as Google in order to reduce the risk of this. However, if you're not educated in why that pop-up is showing up, you just get frustrated that Google is like, you can't go on this website. You can't download Game of Thrones Season 3 from here.
Great, thank you.
So Dominic, I have a couple of questions. One is, so you identified white hat hackers and black hat hackers. How do businesses go about finding the right hacker for them? Like if I'm, Bank of America and I want a white hat hacker to take a look at my system, it's not like I go on the want ads and look for that. So how does that happen?
So many of the white hat hackers that are currently in the business are prolific because they've been doing this for a while. Many big businesses will be looking for someone who has this prior experience. It sounds real lame, but they're kind of like celebrities in their field because of how good they are at what they do. It'd be like looking for a contractor. You'd put out either an ad or reach out through your circle to find a white hat hacker. Many of them have a long history of doing so.
And what do they major in? Like, are they just in?
So there is a wide range of things that they could major in. They don't even necessarily have to have a major. This is a relatively new career, and as such, many of the original people did this because they started to. Like with Bill Gates starting to make computers because he wanted to make computers. These people started doing this for a job. It's built up into that. For people who are, say, trying to get into this now, the type of degrees that they want to have are related to computers and computer science, such as a computer science degree, or they have cybersecurity degrees at many colleges now. Computer, hardware engineering, electrical engineering, these types of things that allow them to know about computers, how the information is stored, and how to protect it would be degrees that would be beneficial to a white hat hacker in this regard. Yes, brothers?
So kind of as a follow-up, so when last year, as a freshman, we took a trip to SMCC, where they had a cybersecurity class.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be the type of class that would train white hat hackers? And if they did, how would they go about making their name in the business?
So for that type of question, that type of class could deal with white hat hacking. It would primarily focus on the defense side of it. So the people who build the systems in the first place. I know that, I believe it was the University of Utah, of all universities, had a huge program about teaching how to hack into things. And there was a huge ethics debate, whether this was moral to teach people how to hack into stuff, because they don't really have to be a good guy after that. They could take all this information and just go in and start hacking things. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect.
I have a question. So I'm a person who has a terrible memory, and so I am definitely guilty of using the same password for multiple things. What would be the number one thing that you could suggest to me to make my internet experience more secure?
So there's a number of things you can do. One of the worst things that you could possibly do, though, is just leave it out, like write it down and just leave it out there. What you could do is get like a password book and write them all down in there. That's one way of doing it that is pretty secure. They'd have to get access to both your password book and your computer in order to do any damage. Not only that, there are some extensions on Chrome, Safari, Firefox that store these passwords. What they do is you have a a password that goes into the extension, allows you in, and it generates a random secure password for you. And when you have this password, it goes through and it's like, google.com, here's your password. And it's like 20 characters long, made of numbers and letters. But when you want to use it, you just go and drag and drop. But in order to get to them first, you have to have your own password. So all you have to do is remember one password, but you have all your passwords there. The only issue with that is the issue of accessing the physical hardware, where if I manage to get the password for that extension, I then theoretically have access to all of them. So as a pro tip, don't leave your laptop where people can reach it, and don't have your one password be obvious. Does that answer your question sufficiently?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And so does the factor of like having a password that has mixed numbers and letters, why is that more secure than all letters or all numbers?
So one way of hacking into a password, besides going in and being like, I bet it's their birthday, typing it in, is they can have a program, it's called a brute force program. And what it does is it just goes A, or A, B, A, C, A, B, and goes through until thousands of permutations of this as fast as it can, looking for the one that is the password.
Mm-hmm.
Once it gets to that, it's easy. So the more complicated your password is, the more different symbols, the more different numbers, the more difficulty they will have, and the more time it will take in order to brute force into it. If you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that might be the first thing they go. They go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, go through each permutation of the password. It'll only take like maybe 3 minutes in order to crack a password like that.
Thanks.
Yes, Joe?
So while you say is that having different passwords, like having the same password is bad, is alterations on the same password? For example, if you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for one account, but then you had 1, 3, 6, 5, 4, 2 for another account, would that be better?
So my first step is don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But to the hacker, there's no difference between that and the same, like a different password. Don't use the basic characters, obviously, but if you have like Timon 06 versus Timon with an I, like a 1 instead of an I, O, like actual letter O, and then like a square, like one of the @ symbols, that's, as far as the computer is concerned and the hacker is concerned, that's a completely different password. Permutations on the same password are fine as long as they are sufficiently different than the original password. If you do Timon 1, Timon 2, Timon 3, then you have an issue. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, any other questions from the panel? Okay, then at this time, Dominic, we're going to ask you and your audience to step out into the pod and we will deliberate.